Two cities, unimaginable wealth, unspeakable cruelty, fertile soil that gave 3 harvests a year, storehouses too full to count, and yet not one open door for a stranger in need. This is the story of Sodom and Gommorah, 2 empires that had everything and threw it all away. By the end, one family will run for their lives. One woman will turn around one time too many, and you will understand why mercy and judgment can exist in the very same breath. Welcome back to Bible Stories Hub. Long before these cities rose, humanity gathered on a wide plain, all speaking a single language. Proud of their own strength, they set out to build a tower that could reach the heavens, a monument to themselves. But their pride did not go unnoticed. In an instant, every builder began speaking a different tongue. Brothers could no longer understand brothers. The work collapsed into confusion. The tower stood unfinished, and the people scattered across the earth in search of new homes. Among the scattered families, one small group wandered for months across cracked deserts, burying loved ones along the way and wondering if they would ever find home again. Then, descending from the dry hills, they saw it, a wide green valley fed by the Jordan River, lush and alive after so much loss. To exhausted travellers, it looked like paradise itself. Here, they decided, they would begin again. Years passed, then generations. Where the travellers first pitched their tents, 5 great cities eventually rose: Sodom, Gommorah, Admah, Zeboim, and Zor. Each had its own king and its own walls. But 2 cities, Sodom and Gommorah, grew far beyond the rest, towering over the valley in power and wealth. Sodom, ruled by King Gommorah, became the seat of power. Its walls stood 5 meters thick, built from millions of mud bricks. At its center rose a 4-story palace, and from its rooftop, Gommorah looked down over an empire. The city even boasted 2 natural springs, one warm, one cold, channeling water straight into its finest homes. While Sodom ruled with power, Gommorah ruled with money. Under King Gommorah, its markets stretched for blocks, filled with traders from Egypt, Babylon, and beyond. Caravans arrived daily, loaded with spices, silk, and silver. What Sodom held in strength, Gommorah held in gold. With 3 harvests every year and storehouses overflowing, life in the valley became almost too easy. Pride crept in first. The wealthy forgot the land had ever been a gift. Then came the hardness. Doors that once opened to travellers now stayed shut, and widows who once found help found only silence. Slowly, cruelty became normal, and the cries of the forgotten began rising from the valley toward heaven. Meanwhile, a man named Lot was travelling with his uncle Abraham, whom God had called to a new land filled with promise. Both men prospered, but eventually their herds grew too large to share the land, and their herdsmen began to quarrel. Abraham offered Lot first choice of where to settle. Lot looked toward the Jordan Valley, green, watered, and rich, and chose it for himself. Abraham stayed in the quiet hill country. Lot pitched his tent facing Sodom, telling himself he would stay close enough to trade, but far enough to remain separate. But nearness slowly became closeness, and closeness became home. Soon, Lot was living inside the city walls. Then war broke out. 4 eastern kings attacked the cities of the plain, and Lot was carried off as a captive. When Abraham heard the news, he gathered his men, pursued the raiders, and rescued his nephew. Lot was free and could have stayed safely with Abraham in the hills. Instead, he chose to go back to Sodom. One day, as Abraham sat at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the afternoon, 3 travelers appeared on the horizon. Without knowing who they truly were, Abraham ran to greet them, bowed low, and insisted they rest and eat. He and Sarah prepared a feast fit for kings. As they ate, one of the visitors made an astonishing promise. Within a year, Sarah, the well past childbearing age, would have a son. From inside the tent, Sarah laughed quietly to herself at the impossibility of it. Before leaving, the visitors looked toward the valley and spoke of Sodom's great wickedness. The outcry against it had reached heaven itself. Abraham's heart sank, knowing Lot lived there. Gathering his courage, he did something no one had done before. He asked directly whether the righteous would be destroyed along with the wicked. Beginning with 50 righteous people, Abraham pleaded the city's case again and again. 50, then 45, then 40, 30, 20, until finally settling on 10. Each time, the answer was the same. For the sake of even that few, the city would be spared. That evening, 2 of the visitors arrived at Sodom, where Lot sat near the city gate. Sensing something different about them, Lot insisted they stay at his home rather than sleep in the streets. He prepared a meal and welcomed them warmly, a small island of kindness inside a cruel city. But before they could rest, a crowd gathered outside, pounding on the door and demanding Lot hand over his guests. When Lot tried to reason with them, the mob turned on him. Inside, the visitors revealed the truth. They had been sent to destroy the city, and Lot needed to gather his family and leave immediately. Lot rushed into the night to warn his daughter's future husbands, but they only laughed at him, certain the walls would still stand in the morning. As dawn broke and Lot still hesitated, the 2 visitors had to take him, his wife, and his daughters by the hand and lead them out of the city themselves. Once outside the walls, the visitors gave one final command: run for the mountains and do not look back. Lot, afraid of the distance, begged instead to flee to the small nearby town of Zoar, and for his sake it was spared. As the sun rose fully over the valley, burning sulphur rained down from the sky. In moments, Sodom and Gommorah were consumed, their walls, towers, and palaces collapsing into ruin. Lot and his daughters kept running, but his wife paused, looked back at the city behind her, and was instantly turned into a pillar of salt. The next morning, far away in the hills, Abraham looked toward the valley and saw thick smoke rising like smoke from a furnace. The cities were gone, but Lot was alive. His prayer had not saved Sodom, but it had reached far enough to save one family,